So we'll start by applying some mahogany, and what I want to do first obviously is do the top and try and get that nice figured grain covered nicely, and then we'll work our way around the sides and finally the back. Now I've mixed up my natural grain fill. It's a water-based product. I've mixed it up at about an additional 20% water to the product. What you really want to do is start applying your grain fill, working across, or working with the grain first, sorry. You see that's it's really getting in there now. And then across the grain. So you're really working into those pores. Given the SG several hours to dry and that grain filler to dry off, next job is to sand away the excess grain filler that's left. So after about 20 minutes I did come along with a damp rag and start to wipe away any excess, which helps reduce the amount of sanding, but we still have some, you can probably see this grey film sitting on the surface here that we really need to remove. Now when you're sanding grain fill, we really need to just sand level to the surface of the wood. With sanding, I used to sand a lot finer grit at this stage, but these days I generally start with a heavier grit. So start with a 120 grit, work my way up to 180 and then on to 220. And what I've found is it's pretty important not to jump between the grades of paper too much, or your finer grade paper is going to have too much work to do. It'll clog up, or you'll just have to push or work the paper too hard, so it'll be too much work, or you'll go through too much paper. So it's pretty important to go from or use three different stages of sanding paper at this point. Okay, so I've got most of that excess removed now. I've only sanded using the 120 grit at this point. So I'll follow up next with the 180, which will remove the scratch marks left from the 120, and then the 220 to remove the scratch marks left from the 180. So I'm really using a low grit paper to remove the grain fill, and then the remaining grades just to tidy up. So if I bring the guitar up nice and close, you should see, hopefully you can see that those grains are filled now, those pores. I've sanded back a lot of that stain off the top, the sides and the back as well. And what I want to do is try and blend another stain with it. I'm just going to apply this to the top as we start. So as per usual, I've got a clean rag. I'm just folding in the edges so that we don't deal with any frayed edges that may leave fibers on the guitar. And we'll be good to go from there. So again, I'm just going to dip the cloth in this diluted teak, golden teak, sorry, and just start applying. We'll let that soak, and I'll come back in about 10 minutes, I'd say, and just wipe away any excess. Next thing I want to do with the SG is stain the neck slightly. So I just want to give it a very light similar colour to the body but much lighter. So I've mixed this down quite a bit. Just put it on a sample piece. It's about the colour I wanted. So something a little brighter but also a little bit lighter. So we've grain filled the back of this neck as shown in a previous video. So from here this should take stain quite well. What I thought I'd do is apply a fine buffing oil, which is a combination of tung oil and wax. And what will happen there is the tung oil will absorb into the timber, and the wax will then sit on the outside, and we can build up those wax layers into something we can polish into a semi-gloss. And I'll just load up my rag, and it's really the same process as staining. We're just dragging that through, and you can see some of that wax that's formulated in the mix there. So I'll be looking to wipe any of that off. And that's really all there is to it. So I would come back about 10 minutes later and just remove any excess with a clean rag, just any excess that hasn't absorbed in, obviously, and then I'd leave it to dry. Just follow the recommendations on the product you're using, but I'm sure it'll be quite similar. Okay, so one of the very last jobs we need to do with our SG guitar kit with regard to finishing is sealing this neck. So finishing guitar necks is a little different to finishing guitar bodies. For one, our hands are all over the neck, so there's a lot of oils and dirt and gunk basically that can transfer from our hands onto the neck. And the second thing is we want the neck to be able to play fast. So if you have a thick glossy finish on the back of the neck, your fingers are going to drag a little bit while you play. So what you really want to do is apply a very light finish to the back, something that will seal it, and then also buff it out to a matte finish, which is generally not going to cause as much friction between your hands and the neck itself. So I'm just putting an oil finish on this. You could use tung oil or true oil is another good option that finishes really nicely, and linseed oil would also be another good option. So really any of those will be fine. You're looking to seal it but without leaving a lot of material on the neck. So hopefully that's useful. Okay, so we've let that oil wax combination finish dry for about 6 hours on this SG guitar body. As I said before, it's a combination product. It's a mix of tung oil and beeswax. The tung oil obviously sinks into the timber and the wax sits on top and offers a protective surface that we can buff out. So what I normally recommend to do is just take a clean rag. Now we're going to be pressing fairly hard and also working in a circular motion, so definitely check your rag, make sure there's nothing in there that could be abrasive to the finish. And really from there, all we're really doing is picking a section and just same as we'd polish a car. And so it really comes down to how long you spend, but you can already see that starting to shine up there, and that's pretty much the goal of what we're trying to do.